Hi, welcome to this third and final chapter in my guide to collecting Imperial Guard infantry. And today, after having spoken to you about the basic Cadians that are available from Games Workshop and the other alternatives that are currently available from Games Workshop, I'm going to be looking further afield and I'm going to be showing you figures and parts that are available from other sources that can be used to make an Imperial Guard infantry regiment. Going beyond the ranges of figures that are currently produced by Games Workshop, you can always try looking for some of the older figures which are no longer made but are still available quite widely on sites such as eBay. Games Workshop has been producing Imperial Guard figures since the days of Rogue Trader, although in those days they were referred to as the Imperial Army to begin with, and of course there are certain other ranges of figures from Warhammer 40,000 which could be used as Imperial Guardsmen now. And you can use these in a couple of ways. You can either make entire armies out of them, which is what I did with these figures and also these figures, or you can add them to other ranges to just add a little more variety if they are close enough, and that's what I did with these two figures. I just painted them up to match my current Catachans. Now, a word of warning about costs. Some can be quite reasonable, a little more than, say, getting them new figures from Forge World. On the other hand, some of these figures are now very collectible. These are, for example, and also any female guardsmen. And these tend to be far more expensive, so if you're looking for those figures you will pay far more than you will for new ones from Games Workshop. Of course, as time went on, Games Workshop introduced the idea of the different regiments, and these figures can still be available off eBay. As I said earlier, you can mix these older Catachans in with the current plastics. The female with the grenade launcher is a Games Workshop Games Day figure, I believe. And again, it's a case of that figure is far more expensive because it's uncommon. We also have a couple of Valhallans that are unpainted if you want a winter look. Mordians. And the Praetorian 24th, who again started off at a Games Day, but and are highly in demand. These figures again are very expensive if you can find them. I'll have to be careful how I pronounce this. I think it's Voisterians or Voistrians. These were some of the last of the new regiments that Games Workshop produced, and they were only available for a short time before being cancelled. And you can also go beyond the Warhammer 40,000 range. Once again, Necromunda figures. These two are Escher figures that I have just painted up to match my Catachans. And these two figures here are Chainsaw Warriors. Chainsaw Warrior was a very old board game, and a few figures were done to go with it. We have one with what is called a Reaper and one with a missile launcher, and I think when properly painted these will blend in with Rogue Trader era troops quite nicely. Sticking with figures currently available from Games Workshop, you can modify the appearance quite considerably just by swapping the heads with some that are available from third parties. There are a number of companies that make variations which are compatible with Cadians, and that's what I've done here. You're seeing 3 different sets of Cadians modified with different heads to create a radically different look. We have some pith helmets. These have come as a resin sprue from Anvil Industries, and you can see I've also got a version with a gas mask at the back. And these are done to mimic the Praetorian 24th, which used to be available and got cancelled, but are still quite popular, it would seem. Then here I've got some near future heads from Pig Iron Productions. These are also available with and without gas masks. And I've gone for an ultra modern look on these soldiers, and as a Complete opposite to that, I've gone for a World War I, World War II look on these Cadians using separate metal heads available from West Wind Games as part of their Berlin or Bust, and also their Secrets of the Third Reich games. And it's not just Cadians you can do this with either. I can't quite remember where I got these boonie hats from, but I've used those to modify these 3 Catachan figures. The cost of these separate heads will vary depending on the supplier. I advise you to shop around because different suppliers will produce the same heads as one another. I know Anvil Industries also does these World War II style heads, as well as many others. So it's worth taking a look around. But in general, the cost of them isn't too bad. You're talking less than £1 a figure, certainly perhaps half or maybe even a third of that if you're buying enough of them. So that is a very economical way of creating a different look to your Cadians or Catachans for very little outlay. And I'm going to round out this video about creating custom Imperial Guard armies by discussing the issue of proxies. And of course, proxies are any figures that aren't made by Games Workshop at all, but that are being used in place of Games Workshop figures in Imperial Guard armies. Now, there are just so many different manufacturers of science fiction figures out there that could be put into service as Imperial Guard, and I can't hope to cover them all in a reasonable amount of time. However, they do tend to break down into a few groups, so I will discuss those instead. Some manufacturers produce figures which really do look as if they're just intended to be used as Imperial Guard. Now these figures here come from Anvil Industries. They're multi-part figures and you can tailor their appearance to pretty much whatever you want. There are different heads, different torsos, different legs, different arms, and there are enough different weapons available from them to give the equivalence of pretty much every option available in the Imperial Guard. So if you're going to be using these, you just buy the figures, assemble them, paint them, and they look the same as Imperial Guard, and there's no real explanation necessary to your opponent. On the other hand, here we've got some figures from the Cryomech range. Now, a rifleman has a rifle, doesn't matter if it's an automatic rifle or a las gun or whatever, the standard rifleman is your standard rifleman. In this case, the flamethrower looks like a flamethrower, and that's okay. But then there's the issue of, well, what do you do about this guy with his minigun? Now, one day you might want to use it as a heavy bolter, another day you might want to use it as an autocannon, so you would have to explain to your opponent what some of these weapons were each time you were playing. That could get a little confusing if you're not careful. So that's a problem with using proxies. Also, you'll see here these 3 don't have proper slotter bases. I've just taken them down to a base for display for this video. So if you were going to use them in Warhammer 40,000, you would probably need to rebase these figures. I also have some figures which really look inspired by the Colonial Marines from Aliens. Again, the riflemen are riflemen. The missile launcher looks pretty good, but what do you do about the smart gun? And are you going to keep it as the same weapon between every battle? So once again, although these are very nice figures, you would have to do quite a bit of explaining to your opponent about what they were. Now, some people look upon proxies as a cheap alternative to Games Workshop figures. Certainly you can get some of these figures here quite reasonably. On the other hand, the figures which look like they are supposed to be for Warhammer 40,000, the cost of these actually rivals cost from Forge World. So you're not necessarily going to save yourself a lot of money just by buying other people's figures. If you hunt around, you could get some cheap ones, but you're more likely to get things like this that you start having to explain to your opponent what they all are. And of course, there is one glaring problem with proxies, and that is, when can you use them? If you're gaming at home, you can use whatever figures you want. The very first time I actually tried an Imperial Guard army, I did make it out of these. I didn't have any of the figures. I just had the introductory army list from 2nd edition, so I tried it out with the models I had to hand. In a Games Workshop store, you just probably won't be able to use them at all. So you would have to have a different set of figures for using in Games Workshop. In independent hobby stores or independently run campaigns and gaming groups, I can't say what rules they would enforce. They may insist on real Games Workshop figures, or they might let you get away with proxies, but you would have to find out beforehand. Having said that, I do have to admit that if you look hard enough for proxy figures, you may just come across some of the most awesome troops in the galaxy. Thanks for watching. Bye.